Hello and welcome to New Home DIY with me, Dave Wellman. Today I'm in Ramsgate with Joanne and her 3-year-old daughter, Neve. They've recently moved into a Victorian terraced house and Joanne thought the only room that needed some attention was the kitchen and the rest just needed a lick of paint. How wrong was she? Hello.
Hello,
how
hi.
are you?
Yeah, fine, thank you. You?
Wow, this is great. A bit of Victorian left here that we can see. That looks fantastic.
Yes,
nice
we've still got some of the cornice and the original pelmeting too. So that's usually in there is where we usually sit.
It's a bit jam-packed with stuff at the moment.
It is, yes, yeah. Where we've moved everything out of the dining room.
So this is going to be your dining room.
This will be the dining room when it's finished.
And what's happened here? You've had a go?
I've had a go. Took the wallpaper off and the plaster basically blown, so decided to take it back to the bare brickwork. Yeah. But unfortunately, when we got to this point here, concrete on the wall, that is very, very solid.
Yeah, not too bad though. That looks quite stable, so the brickwork should be okay. Quite solidly built.
Certainly that side. I'm not quite sure about that side, so decided not to bother taking any more concrete off, just in case.
Right. What's gone on there?
Originally, when I bought the property, that was covered and it was artexed over. When I took it down to see what was underneath, found this lovely tongue and groove. Yeah. Some of the wood had started to give way, so I just ripped it off. So that needs fixing too.
So nice little mission here then. We've got a nice flat wall to perform here. Try and get that nice and flat. Possibly a bit of skirting. Yes. Have you thought about coving or anything in the top?
Yeah, coving would be lovely.
Yeah, and a bit of tongue and groove on there as well.
Yeah, to mend that.
First stage is to stabilise this wall because you can see the plaster that's come off is very dusty.
Yes.
And it means that not a lot is going to stick to that. So this solution here is exactly what we're going to paint on. So we've got a sort of PVA solution and it doesn't really matter about the dust underneath it. We just keep brushing until it's got a coat on there. Can you see how that's working?
Yes.
But all the other dust will just fall off, all the surplus that we don't want. And then that will then lead us on to our next stage.
So how long will this take to dry?
This stuff shouldn't take too long to dry. You can actually see up here, see where it's gone slightly darker?
Oh, yes.
It's actually drying already. So we should be able to plaster onto it almost straight away. Jo paid £120,000 for her new house in Ramsgate, where she and Neve have made their new home in the last 10 months.
Well, originally I moved down here because I needed to be closer to work so that I could get more work. But as you can see, we've got the lovely Royal Harbour here, the only one in the country. It's just lovely. Love living by the sea, better quality of life. And Neve, she absolutely adores coming down here.
Very handy, these bits of plasterboard you've got lying around. As plaster doesn't stick to wood, we need to fix plasterboard over any joists or lintels, then we'll plaster over the board. Whoa, there's a tiny bit of, you can hear that creaking? Bit of movement in that timber there, but it's not supporting anything too heavy. So the amount of plaster that we've got going on the front there, which is about 1.5 inches, should stabilise that and hold it all together. So nothing to worry about.
There we go. I'd like to really completely renovate the house, but obviously it needs a lot of work doing to it, so it's going to have to be slowly. The other thing also is that I've got quite expensive taste, but I do believe that a job should be done properly, you know, so I will take my time over it. But, you know, I just really want to make it a lovely little home for Neve to grow up in now.
Now, this can sometimes be a problem with very old houses, is that they're built really well. Trying to get this out extremely carefully so I don't destroy what's on the other side. Oh, that sounds good. Joanne's wall is very uneven across the whole surface, so I'm going to need a lot of bonding to get a level finish. Bonding needs to be about the consistency of clotted cream, so you should achieve this with about 3 parts bonding to 1 part water. I've got some very varying depths of brickwork here. You can see they're all over the place. So I've got to press the plaster into all the crevices so that we know we're filling every single hole up. Now we're going to have a nice thick bit of plaster up here with some timber behind it. As you can see the build up there, so we've got a nice thick piece of plaster to fix either a curtain rail or something too. And you can have some really heavy curtains if you want, because you know it's going to stay there. You've had a good go at the rest of the house in the time that you've been here.
Yeah, I have had a good go at it. Unfortunately, the majority of the rooms I haven't been able to finish because of one thing or another. The bathroom needs replastering and my bedroom needs replastering. In Neve's bedroom, I've had 2 walls down, which I've subsequently had replastered.
Yeah.
I'm getting there slowly but surely. Do you take sugar, Dave?
No sugar for me, thanks.
Where shall I pop it?
Lovely.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
There's been an awful lot of blood, sweat and tears that has gone into trying to make this property a home for Neve and myself. And unfortunately, there have been some nights when I've come to bed and I've cried with frustration because I'm unable to get on with one job. You know, what happens is that I'll start something, find that there's a problem, and I can't carry on until that problem has been rectified, and it has just taken its toll. But I do feel that now I'm getting somewhere, you know, so I'm starting to feel a whole lot more positive about the whole process.
That should be enough plaster on this wall for now. It's pretty thick on this wall. Now, if you look along this line here, I've put an extra bead on the door frame here, because when I looked along this line, the window reveals didn't match the door frame, so the wall would have been on a slight angle. So I've straightened it all up now, plenty of plaster on there, but I've got to give it some time to dry. And in the meantime, I'm going to take that off. Joanne?
Yep.
I'm just going to let you know, I'm doing a bit of a turnabout on this. I was going to pull all this off, and having taken that first one out to get the plaster on, I've noticed the plasterboard on the stairwell is very close. It's going to do more harm than good by taking this off. So I'll leave this here and fix all of the new tongued and grooved timber across the top of that. And should we keep nice straight lines everywhere?
Yep, straight lines is good.
Timber underside as well?
Yes, please.
So complete timber all the way through. Well, this shouldn't take too long, so you can get yourself ready for a masterclass in timber cladding.
Lovely.
Good-o.
The one thing that attracted me to this house was the fact that it did have a lot of the original features. I've got all the original fireplaces in both bedrooms, plus the bathroom. I had a replacement, but at least period fireplace down in the lounge, so that was good. I knew that the house did need a little bit of work to it, but I just thought it was going to be the kitchen, rip everything else off, and that I'd get the place decorated within a couple of weeks. So really, a nice period feature property.
Now you may wonder why, after spending so much time getting this wall lovely and flat, I'm scratching pretty patterns in it. Now the idea of this is to etch a little key into the wall for the finished coat of plaster to stick nicely onto that. Because this plaster's so thick, I need to float it off with a float, and what I've done is I've put some screws in the float, which turns it into what plasterers call a devil float. And those screws scratch the pattern as I flatten out the wall. And then when this plaster starts to turn black, it'll be ready for a finish coat. You remember the piece of tongued and grooved I took off of the underside of the stairwell? You can see if you look closely, it's lost its definition with the amount of paint build-up over the years. So I'm going to recreate that with a new piece of tongued and grooved. And what I need for this is a pair of goggles to start and a router to run straight along that edge to create a new piece. created the feature I need in all of these pieces of timber. I now need to cut them up to create all the pieces I need to fix to the underside of the stairwell in there. I'm going to use a mitre saw, so not at 90 degrees, but at 45 degrees to cut all those mitres. That's set perfectly. A little noisy, a little dusty, and perhaps even a little smoky. Joanne! Aha!
Hello.
You ready for this?
I am.
I've cut lots of pieces of timber. We've recreated that feature in there, so that should look nice. Now, I'm going to show you, your masterclass is in secret nailing. With Tongued and Grooved, we can hide all of the nails within this recess so that you don't have nail holes on the front and then have to fill them all before you paint it.
Okay.
So a nice little trick. What we do is we bang the nails in at an angle into there. You see that? And then with a punch, we hide them like that. Now, these are quite antiquated tools. As you can see, they don't get used too often, so I've got something very modern. Just on this edge here, where I've butted the timber up against the undercoating plaster, I don't want to cover the timber in this finished plaster, so little technique here is just to get a tiny bit on the edge of the trowel, just like that, and put the trowel gently into the corner and trowel away from the wood. And that should keep everything neat and just fill that gap very smartly. There you go. There is a strange thing you may have noticed about plaster if you've watched it go on the walls. You see I've got some varying colours going on here. I've got a grey plaster underneath here, which comes from my local area, East Sussex, and we've got a sort of pinky, muddy colour plaster that comes from a bit further north. And what happens in the UK is the further north you travel, the muddier and dirtier the gypsum quartz that this plaster's made of gets. And if you travel across the Channel to France and down to Paris, plaster of Paris is white, so the quartz in France is very, very clean.
Right, how's it going?
Good, Joanne, it's going great. Getting some finished plaster on the walls, which is good, which means before long we're going to be thinking about some cornice work in the top. And got any ideas what you want up there?
Well, I've been round to a neighbour's house. They've got similar cornice in their dining room as I've got in my front room. Do you think I'd be able to get anything like that?
Well, the traditional plaster is very ornate, and I know to replace something like that would cost quite a lot of money. But there are some modern profiles available, and not just the simple cove, so it might be worth having a look, see what you can source.
Right, OK, I've got a builder's merchant just down the road, so I'll go off and do that now.
All right.
See you later.
See you later. Because the bonding plaster on Joanne's house is so thick, it'll take at least a month to dry properly, so now is a good time to choose and fix dado, coving and architraves.
Hi, can I help you there?
Yeah, looking for some Victorian-style coving for a property that I've bought. It's to go up in the dining room. I just wondered if this was in keeping with the period.
This is the cornicing that we do. We also do the standard cove, but this is very popular in the local area for the houses around here.
Would you be able to deliver this afternoon?
Yeah, do this afternoon for you, no problem. Just come down to the...
And a box of coving lengths costs around £20 for 18 metres, or 6 3-metre lengths. Any plasterer worth his salt should be able to get the plaster on the wall flat enough to trowel it up very easily. If you're trying it yourself and you can't get it on that flat, the idea is to use a wet brush and actually pretend you're painting the plaster on the wall, and it should flatten it off quite neatly. And then as you draw the trowel across it, you take all the fat out of the plaster, and that's what you're trying to do.
Obviously, I realised that the house hadn't been decorated for a good few years, but I really did think that, as it had probably been decorated within 15 years, that some of the things that have been done to it, like the plaster work, would have all been done. When I had the new radiators put on, this was where the old radiator was, and as you can see, the plaster has blown in this room too. Unfortunately, what happened was when I took the wallpaper down, the reason the wallpaper had been put up on the wall was to hide the bad plaster work.
I hate this.
Yes, that was in a moment of frustration. I had a lot of work to do up in Neve's bedroom.
Yeah.
And it's just an awful lot sanding down, and I just didn't get the finish that I wanted in the end, so that's why I did this.
So you would prefer a plaster finish on that
I
one?
prefer a plaster finish, yes.
Well, no, I've got some left in my bucket. So if I do that, that should tidy that up very nicely.
OK, lovely. Thank you very much.
I'll crack on.
Make that look so easy.
This really is a multi-purpose space. Joanne will use it as her office, dining room and as a playroom for her daughter Neve. The tongue and groove pine cladding is a restored original feature to this house, and I've got an idea about using it to create some extra storage space. Caught me scribbling again. Now, Joanne said to me she had a bit of a problem with storage, so I thought it might be a nice idea to combine some storage with some seating for her dining room. So a little window seat that has a bit of use of the tongued and grooved that we used on the underside of the stairs, so we've got a bit of a theme running on. Now, I've done this scribble, so that's hopefully what it should look like. And over the page, a little exploded diagram. So it's going to be in 4 sections, 2 sides, a front and a hinged top. So I've got lots of tongue and groove to cut and lots of screwing and gluing. The moment of truth. Well, that's the window seat completed, and it holds me up. All I've got to do now is some skirting, some architrave around the window, and some coving.
I've really enjoyed being able to get in there and give things a go myself. I can then show people when they come to the house, OK, I didn't cut the wood, but I helped put it up there. So that's really good. I haven't just been standing around and watching all the time. It's been nice to kind of get in there and help.
And you've done it. Quick tip. Joanne's got some new ornate skirting in her dining room, and she wants the rest of the house to look just like that. But the skirting in the rest of the house is very plain. Now, if you get some architrave and cut it in half, rather than rip all the old skirting out, you can just add that bit to the top. How's that? Well, that's all the architrave finished, Joanne, so we're on to skirting now, and I'm using plugs and screws to fix all the skirting. We've got this nice thick solid plaster wall now, so we can drill straight into that. But the original Victorian way would have been to set blocks of wood into the plaster and then nail into those blocks of wood.
Okay.
So a lot trickier, but this is much simpler. All lined up, ready for you to do the business with that. This is the cornice that Joanne's chosen for her dining room. It's got an OG profile, just like the architrave in the same room, so it should match nicely. Now we need to mitre cut this, and on that mitre cut you can see the profile very easily. I've got a template gauge here that you can get from most trade suppliers. You should be able to get it from anywhere you can get this stuff. Basically, you lay it against the cornice and use a very old saw, not a new one if you can help it, to cut and follow that profile down, and then you get a very neat mitre cut. that gives us the perfect mitre. Okay, Joanne. As many hands as possible with this job. Now, we're using an air drying adhesive here rather than a chemically setting adhesive. This is much easier to play with. It's much more forgiving.
Okay, and how do we get rid of this where it's gone onto the plaster?
Oh, well, that's all right. We scrape it away at first, and because it's air drying, you can actually wipe it off with a wet sponge. As easy as that. That's it. Okay. Up into the corner. And there it is, the final piece. Well, Joanne, what do you think?
I think it's absolutely fantastic. I just can't believe what you've managed to do in these past couple of days. I'm just so grateful. Thank you very much.
No problem. When you remember what it was like, this wall, your nightmare wall, and we straightened that out, a few architraves and some work up there on the underside of the stairs, a bit of skirting, the finished plaster with enough left over for a bonus wall, architrave around the window, and coving. And, of course, somewhere for Neve's toys. Joanne has been really busy over the last few weeks. She's had the rest of the dining room skimmed, finished off all the coving and the skirting, fixed up new dado, as well as installing her fireplace. The plaster still isn't dry enough for painting yet, but Joanne has given the ceiling and woodwork a first coat and put a threshold on the floor ready for carpeting. It just goes to show what a difference it makes to the whole of your house when you can conquer just one dilemma in your new home DIY.